In the long arc of history, some cities shine incredibly bright, and Tyre was one of them. It was a true titan of the ancient world, a fortress of unbelievable power and wealth. But here's the thing. Its spectacular downfall was actually predicted in stunning detail centuries before it ever happened. So today, we're going to dive into this incredible story of history and prophecy. Now listen to those words from the prophet Ezekiel. These weren't spoken against some small, fledgling village. No, this was a prophecy aimed at one of the mightiest, most secure cities in the ancient world, a prediction of total, absolute desolation for a city that, for all intents and purposes, seemed eternal. And this is the central tension of the whole story. You've got this immense contrast, right? On one hand, you have Tyre, the very definition of power, of security. And on the other, you have these ancient prophecies that declare its specific and total destruction. You have to ask, how could something like that possibly come to pass? To really get a grip on the fall of Tyre, we first have to appreciate the incredible heights from which it fell. I mean, this wasn't just any city. It was a strategic and economic marvel of its time. Tyre's history goes back for millennia. It was ancient even to the people we consider ancient. It founded legendary colonies like Carthage, and maybe most importantly, it had already survived a 13-year siege from the Babylonian king, Nebuchadnezzar. This city knew how to endure. So what made Tyre so tough? Well, its strength was layered. First, you have its location, an island fortress half a mile offshore, protected by walls that soared 150 feet into the air. An army couldn't just march up to its gates. To attack Tyre, you needed absolute naval superiority, and the Tyrian fleet was dominant. For all practical purposes, it was unconquerable. But while Tyre was busy building up this incredible worldly power, a very different kind of judgment was being declared against it, a judgment that spoke of its complete and utter ruin. And this verse from Ezekiel is absolutely key to understanding the why behind this prophecy. You see, when Babylon destroyed Jerusalem, which was a rival financial center, Tyre celebrated. That pride, that mockery over Jerusalem's fall, was cited as the very reason for its own prophesied doom. And it doesn't stop there. Centuries later, another prophet, Zechariah, adds even more specific details. Now pay close attention to the predictions here. Its power in the sea would be broken, and the city itself would be devoured with fire. These weren't vague warnings. These were precise declarations of how a military defeat would unfold. So for over 250 years, those prophecies just lay dormant. Tyre continued on in its strength. Then, in 332 BC, the catalyst for its destruction finally arrived at its shores: Alexander the Great. The confrontation starts as a political test of wills. Alexander asked to enter the city to sacrifice to their god, Molkart. This was his standard operating procedure. If you accepted, it meant you acknowledged his rule. But Tyre, feeling confident and secure behind its walls, refused. It was a calculated and very direct act of defiance. But here is where Tyr's defiance escalates into a fatal, catastrophic error. They didn't just refuse him entry, they murdered his envoys and then threw their bodies from the top of the city walls. In the ancient world, violating diplomatic immunity like this was a capital crime. This one act sealed their fate and guaranteed a terrible, terrible retribution was coming. So, Alexander now faced this immense challenge. How do you attack an island fortress when you don't have a superior navy? Well, his solution was one of the most audacious and brilliant feats of military engineering in all of history. Alexander's plan was incredible. First, he decided he would march his army across the sea. How? By building a stone causeway, a land bridge, all the way to the island, using the rubble from the old mainland city of Tyre. Then, he assembled a massive fleet from other conquered cities to get the naval power he needed. With that fleet, he blockaded the harbors and finally defeated Tyre's navy. And after 7 long, grueling months, his siege engines reached and finally breached those supposedly impenetrable walls. And when the end came, the fall of Tyre was every bit as violent and as total as its defense had been defiant. What happened next was a grim fulfillment of Alexander's wrath. Just in the final storming of the city, as the walls came down, 8,000 of Tyr's defenders and citizens were killed in the fighting. And the retribution didn't end with the battle. 30,000 survivors were rounded up and sold into slavery. Their city was gone, their lives erased. And then, in a final, absolutely terrifying display of power, Alexander ordered 2,000 Tyrian men to be crucified all along the coastline. This wasn't just punishment, it was a public, horrific warning to any other city that might even think about defying him. So now that we've laid out the historical events, let's go back to those ancient prophecies and see exactly how they line up with what actually happened. When you put them side by side, the connections are, well, they're striking. Ezekiel predicted its stones would be laid in the midst of the water. That is precisely what Alexander did to build his causeway. Zechariah predicted its power in the sea would be smitten, and that's fulfilled when Alexander's new fleet destroys Tyre's navy. The city was to be devoured with fire, and history records that it was sacked and burned. Its commercial dominance was shattered, leaving it, just as Ezekiel foretold, as a place for fishermen to spread their nets. You know, the legacy of this event is literally etched into the earth. That causeway Alexander built trapped silt over the centuries, and it permanently connected the island to the mainland. The island fortress of Tyre is no longer an island. It's a lasting physical scar from that fateful siege. So, all of this leaves us with a pretty profound question. Was the Fall of Tyre simply one of history's most brilliant and brutal military campaigns? Or was Alexander the Great, in all his ambition and all his fury, an unwitting instrument in the fulfillment of a divine warning given centuries before he was even born?